At my sister's wedding, her husband shouted right in my face, "You're not part of our family! You shouldn't be here!" He snatched my plate and smashed it on the floor, shards flying everywhere, then forbade the server from giving me anything to eat, his voice booming across the silent room. But suddenly, a tall man in an elegant suit stepped forward from the crowd, a stranger with silver hair and sharp eyes. He leaned in close and whispered, "Take my arm. They'll go silent the moment they see who's standing by your side." "Hello, Emily Carter here. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if this hooks you. Enjoy the story, but to see how this raw humiliation turned into my unbreakable comeback, let's dive right in." The Regency Ballroom at the Hyatt Regency in Chicago, Illinois, gleamed under chandeliers that hit like spotlights. This venue screamed luxury. A single appetizer here outpriced my monthly car payment. Today, my family celebrated my sister, the one who'd always demanded the spotlight, snapping up whatever caught her eye since childhood. I adjusted my modest blue dress, bought on clearance, and fixed up myself after endless hours planning lessons. The fabric felt reliable, but amid the guests' dazzling ensembles, I blended into the background. No greeting at the entrance. My sister's husband had bolted over at dawn to supervise, though I knew he was just guzzling premium scotch with his crew. I found my spot on the chart. Table 32, weaving through the vast space past women in shimmering silk and men in crisp tuxes. Table 32 hid in the far corner beside swinging kitchen doors, heat waves and onion sizzle wafting out, servers darting by and clipping my seat. I sat isolated like an unwelcome shadow. At the elevated head table, my mother presided, heavy with pearl strands that seemed to pull her posture straight. Next to her, my sister's husband, flushed already, tie askew, had his raucous laugh piercing the air. He never once scanned toward my dim nook. An hour ticked by. Toasts rang out. Guests yelled, "Kiss the bride," clinked crystal, feasting on filet mignon, king crab legs, and delicate foie gras bites. Tables groaned under the spread, yet no one approached table 32. I'd skipped meals all day, wrapping up school reports to make it here punctual. Hunger clawed inside. A server hustled past, laden with smoked salmon. I swallowed pride and murmured, "Excuse me, could I have a small piece? It's been over an hour." He halted, offered an apologetic grin, and reached for my plate. "Of course, sorry about the rush." Then a hulking shadow dropped. A firm hand clamped his shoulder, flinching him back, tongs tumbling. "Don't you dare!" His snarl cut sharp. I glanced up. My sister's husband towered, intoxicated eyes blazing, his friends lurking behind, smirking for the spectacle. Music dipped as the DJ switched. In the sudden quiet, his roar exploded. He grabbed my plate and hurled it shattering. "Didn't you get the memo?" He spat, arms flaring. "What's your game?" I recoiled, face aflame. Hundreds of stares pinned us. "What are you doing?" I whispered, lump rising. "I only asked for food." "Food?" He sneered to the audience, arms wide. "Check her out. She's here to pig out." My mother paused, chewing, watching with a satisfied curl. My sister covered her mouth, stifling a laugh. He loomed near, reeking of liquor and foreign perfume. "You're no family, Emily. Drill that in. You're a leech, sucking off our success." He straightened, barked at the rattled server. "I forbid serving her. Let her stare at proper people dining or bolt." Dead quiet enveloped the space. A nervous cough echoed. Others looked away. No interference. His buddies howled like it was prime comedy. A snap echoed within me. The last thread holding this toxic bond frayed clean through. But I froze. Shame drowning me thick. He pivoted, smug, heading back. Then the atmosphere cracked. From the shadows, as if conjured, a man emerged, broad-shouldered, silver hair groomed precise, in that elegant suit tailored to perfection. Guests didn't know him, hadn't seen him enter. He strode, commanding the room, crowd parting instinctively from his aura. He neared table 32, eyes fixed solely on me. Cool assessment, no pity. He offered his hand, demanding yet steady. I met his gaze, tears blurring. He bent, whispering clear in the hush. Take my arm and they'll go silent the moment they see who's standing by your side. I took his arm without thinking twice. The second my fingers touched the sleeve of that perfectly cut suit, the entire ballroom seemed to inhale at once. Robert Sterling guided me straight through the frozen crowd, past the head table where my mother's mouth actually hung open and my sister Sarah Thompson went pale under her professional makeup. Michael Hayes, her brand new husband, stood halfway out of his chair, red-faced and swaying, like he couldn't decide whether to charge or sit back down. Robert never raised his voice. He simply kept walking until we reached the small stage where the band had gone quiet. He lifted one hand, a tiny motion, and the microphone appeared in it as if by magic. He tapped it once. Feedback squealed, then silence fell harder than before. Good evening, Robert said, calm and clear, the kind of voice that closes million-dollar deals before breakfast. I apologize for interrupting the celebration, but there seems to be a misunderstanding about who is and isn't family tonight. A ripple of nervous laughter fluttered through the room. Michael took a stumbling step forward. Who the hell are you? He barked. Robert smiled, small and sharp. Someone who just paid the final invoice for this wedding, including the open bar you've been enjoying, Michael Hayes. Gasps and whispers erupted. My mother, Patricia Hayes, clutched her pearls so hard I thought they'd snap. Robert continued, Since I covered the bill, I believe I'm entitled to invite whoever I want to dinner. Emily stays. Anyone who has a problem with that can settle the check on their way out. He handed the mic back to the stunned DJ, placed my hand on his forearm again, and led me off the stage as if we were the only two people in the room. Cameras flashed. Phones came out. Michael lunged, but two groomsmen suddenly found their courage missing and grabbed his arms instead. Sarah hissed something at him I couldn't hear. Patricia looked ready to faint. We didn't stop at the coat check. Robert steered me through a side door marked staff only, down a service corridor that smelled of bleach and fried food, and out into the valet circle where a black town car waited, engine already running. The driver held the back door. I slid across cool leather. Robert followed, closed the door, and the noise of the ballroom vanished. Only then did my legs start shaking. I stared at him. Who are you? My voice cracked. He gave a short, almost amused breath. Your husband, Emily. Technically still, anyway. My stomach flipped harder than it had inside. We'd been separated almost 3 years, speaking only through lawyers, and I hadn't laid eyes on him since the day he moved out of our Lincoln Park condo. Yet here he was, silver at the temples now, looking every inch the real estate mogul the newspapers loved to quote. Why are you here? I managed. He glanced out the tinted window as the car pulled away from the curb. Because your loving family just tried to starve you in front of 300 people on my dime. And because I'm tired of watching them use you as their doormat. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick envelope and dropped it in my lap. Open it when you're ready. Short version. Your mother and sister have been forging your signature for the last 18 months to hide assets from the IRS and from me. Every property your family owns, every company share, every offshore account they thought was safe, is now in your name only. I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. That's impossible. I'm just a third-grade teacher. Robert's mouth curved, not quite a smile. Exactly why they thought you'd never notice. They were wrong. The car merged onto Lakeshore Drive, city lights streaking past. My phone started exploding with texts. Sarah's name, Michael's, Patricia's, numbers I didn't recognize, all capital letters and exclamation marks. I silenced it. Robert watched me do it. You don't owe them nothing, Emily. Not an explanation, not a phone call, nothing. I swallowed hard. They're still my family. No, he said quietly. They're people who share DNA. Family is a choice. Tonight, they made theirs. He leaned forward, spoke to the driver. Take us to Gibson's on Rush. Then to me. You're eating actual food tonight. Then we're going to talk about what happens next. because in about 6 hours your mother is going to realize the locks on the Gold Coast penthouse no longer recognize her key." I laughed, an ugly, half-hysterical sound. "You're enjoying this." Robert looked at me, eyes serious. "I'm enjoying watching you finally stop apologizing for existing. The rest is just paperwork." The car slowed in front of the steakhouse. Valets rushed over. Robert stepped out first, came around, and offered his hand again. This time I took it without hesitation. Cameras from passing phones flashed once more, but I didn't flinch. Somewhere behind us, my old life was already burning to the ground, and for the first time in years I felt warm. The steak arrived rare and perfect, but I barely tasted it. Robert cut his fillet with surgical precision while he laid everything out like he was presenting a closing argument. He slid a slim folder across the white tablecloth. Inside were transfer deeds, quitclaim documents, and LLC operating agreements, all dated over the past year and a half. My signature appeared on every page, neat and unmistakable. Except I had never seen any of them before tonight. "Patricia started the process right after the IRS audit notice hit the family holding company," he said, voice low enough that the nearest table couldn't overhear. "She and David Hayes, your brother, decided the cleanest way to shield assets was to put them in the name of the one person nobody would ever suspect of hiding money, the elementary school teacher who still clips coupons." I flipped another page and felt the blood leave my face. The Gold Coast penthouse, the commercial buildings in Fulton Market, the vacation home in Saugatuck, even the real estate partnership that owned half the strip malls along the North Shore. Everything now belonged to Emily Carter alone. I looked up. "How?" Robert sipped his bourbon. "They forged your signature, used a crooked notary your mother plays bridge with, and filed everything electronically. They told themselves you'd never notice because you never asked for anything." He tapped a highlighted line. "They were planning to force you to sign everything back over once the audits blew over, probably scare you with some fake legal threat. Tonight was supposed to be the first step, remind you of your place so you'd stay quiet and grateful." My fork clattered against the plate. The pieces clicked together like puzzle tiles. All those times Patricia had showed up at my apartment with random papers, always something about helping with taxes or a little deduction for charity. I had signed without reading closely because I trusted my own mother. I thought she was finally being nice. Robert watched the realization hit me. He didn't smile. He just waited. Then he opened a second folder. Bank statements this time. Large cash withdrawals from the company account, routed through David's personal LLC, then funneled into a personal injury settlement. I scanned the memo lines until one stopped me cold. "Confidential settlement, T. Lawson." My throat closed. Timothy Lawson had been one of my third graders 2 years ago, a quiet boy with freckles and a limp that appeared overnight. Sarah had been driving the Range Rover that night, coming home from a club in River North. She clipped Timothy crossing at a crosswalk, broke his femur and pelvis. The family paid the hospital, paid the lawyers, paid the boy's mother 6 figures to sign an NDA, and move to Arizona. All of it came out of company money they were already hiding from the IRS. David handled the payoffs. Patricia wrote the checks. Robert closed the folder. They needed the assets out of their names fast, and they needed a scapegoat if the feds ever came knocking. Guess who volunteers at the school book fair and has no criminal record? Me. They had built the perfect fall girl. I pushed my plate away. The smell of red meat suddenly turned my stomach. I stared across the table at the man I had once sworn to love forever and had barely spoken to in 3 years. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because until tonight, you still answered their calls. You still showed up when they snapped their fingers. I needed you to see exactly who they are when they think nobody's watching." He leaned forward. "And I needed them to do it in public so there would be witnesses when the hammer finally drops." He paid the check without looking at the total, then guided me back to the car. The driver headed north toward Lincoln Park. I clutched the folders on my lap like they were made of dynamite. My phone kept lighting up. Sarah crying. Michael threatening. Patricia demanding I call her immediately. I turned it face down. Robert spoke to the quiet interior. Tomorrow morning, the locks on every property get changed. The corporate accounts freeze pending forensic review. David's Little Side LLC gets a visit from the IRS by noon. And you, Emily, get to decide how loud you want the consequences to be. I looked out at the dark lake rushing past the window. For the first time in my adult life, the word consequences didn't scare me at all. The car stopped in front of my modest two-bedroom in Lincoln Park. Robert walked me to the entrance, kissed my cheek once, and said the driver would wait until I was safely inside. I climbed the 3 flights, keys already in hand, expecting the familiar click. Instead, the deadbolt refused to turn. I tried again, harder. Nothing. The super's emergency line rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. He told me the locks had been changed that afternoon by order of the building owner. New keys would be delivered tomorrow. The owner was listed as Emily Carter. My own name now locked me out of my own apartment. I stood in the hallway staring at the brass knob when the door swung open from the inside. A woman I had never seen before stood there in one of my old robes, hair wet, belly slightly rounded under the fabric. She smirked. "You're early." Blonde, sharp cheekbones, expensive highlights. Jessica Reed, the assistant Michael had hired 6 months ago to help with scheduling. She stepped aside like she belonged there. "Come in, the shower's still hot." I didn't move. "Who gave you a key?" She laughed, low and lazy. "Michael did, obviously. He said the place was empty most nights anyway." She rubbed the small bump under the robe. "We needed somewhere private. Your mom knew. She even paid the rent last month when Michael was short." My pulse hammered in my ears. I pushed past her into the living room. My furniture was still there, but throw pillows I didn't own now sat on the couch, men's shoes by the door, an open bottle of champagne sweating on the coffee table. Jessica followed, barefoot, amused. "Relax, we're keeping it quiet until the divorce from Sarah is final. Michael promised he'd put this condo in my name once everything settles." I turned slowly. "Get out!" She rolled her eyes. "You can't kick me out. I'm carrying his kid." She patted the bump like it was a winning lottery ticket. Footsteps came from the bedroom. David emerged, pulling a t-shirt over his head, froze when he saw me, then tried a sheepish grin. This isn't what it looks like." Except it was exactly what it looked like. Jessica's smile widened. She walked over and looped an arm through David's. "Tell her, baby. Tell her how long we've been keeping each other company while Michael's been busy with the Ice Queen." David's face went gray. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "It just happened. Stress from the IRS stuff. Jessica understands the pressure." I felt the walls tilt. My own brother, my own apartment, my own family treating my life like a free motel. I pulled out my phone, dialed building security, and put it on speaker. The guard picked up fast. "Front desk. This is Emily Carter, owner of Unit 3C. There are 2 unauthorized people inside my residence right now. I need them removed immediately." Jessica snorted. "You're bluffing." David started toward me. "Emily, come on, we're blood." Security knocked 30 seconds later. 2 large men in uniform. I opened the door wider. The taller guard looked at me, then at Jessica and David. "Ma'am, do you want these individuals escorted out?" "Yes, and change the locks again tonight. Only my key from now on." Jessica grabbed a designer bag, still dripping sarcasm. "This is insane. Michael's going to hear about this." David tried pleading. Think about Mom." I looked him dead in the eye. "I am." They left barefoot into the rain, Jessica clutching a silk robe around her, David carrying his shoes. The guards followed them down the stairwell. One came back with a new key and a work order signed by the management company. My name at the bottom in bold. I closed the door, slid every bolt, and leaned against it until my knees gave out. My phone buzzed nonstop on the floor where I'd dropped it. Sarah's name flashed, then Michael's, then a string of unknown numbers. I powered it off completely. The apartment smelled like Jessica's perfume and David's cologne, cheap and cloying. I opened every window, even though sheets of rain blew in, then stripped the bed, bagged the sheets, and dragged the mattress to the hallway for trash pickup. By the time the sun started creeping over the lake, the place smelled only of lemon cleaner and cold air. I sat on the bare floor, back against the wall, and finally opened the thick envelope Robert had given me earlier. Page after page of assets, accounts, deeds, all mine. At the very bottom lay a single sticky note in his handwriting. You never needed their permission to take up space. Now you don't need their forgiveness either. The hallway outside my classroom filled with voices long before first bell. I stepped out holding my coffee and stopped dead. Patricia stood in the center, surrounded by cousins I hadn't seen in years, all dressed like they were heading to brunch at the Drake afterward. She wore a camel coat and that practice smile she saved for school fundraisers. A few parents already lingered, phones half raised. My principal, Laura Peterson, hovered nearby looking uncomfortable in her navy blazer. Patricia spotted me and raised her voice just enough for the growing crowd. There's my daughter, the one causing all this unnecessary drama. She opened her arms like she expected a hug. I didn't move. One of the cousins muttered something about ingratitude. Laura cleared her throat. Emily, maybe we should speak privately. Patricia cut in before I could answer. Nothing private about family business, dear. Emily seems to think she can freeze her own mother out of her home. A third-grade boy tugged his mom's sleeve. Miss Carter's in trouble? Phones were fully out now. Laura's face tightened. She took my elbow and steered me toward the office, Patricia's little entourage trailing like paparazzi. Inside, door closed, Laura folded her arms. I've already had 3 parent emails this morning. The school can't be part of personal disputes, Emily. If this continues, the district will have to review your position. I stared at her. 23 years of perfect evaluations, Teacher of the Year twice, and one viral family scene could end it. Patricia smiled through the glass window, waving at passing children like a celebrity. I walked out without another word, left my coffee on the desk, and drove straight to the bank. The branch manager recognized me now. She led me to a private room and pulled up the commercial accounts. Over $2 million had moved in the last 18 months, chunks labeled legal settlement, medical reimbursement, consulting fees. Every withdrawal carried my forged initials. I printed the statements, signed for copies, and walked out with a thick stack that smelled like fresh ink and betrayal. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Grant Park Fountain. Alone. 30 minutes. We can fix this. M. I knew better, but I went anyway. Michael waited on a bench, coat collar turned up, looking hungover and furious. He stood when he saw me. No greeting, just business. Sign the properties back over, 50-50 split after taxes, and we all walk away quiet. You get a nice nest egg, we keep the company afloat, nobody goes to prison. I stayed on the path, kept distance. You mean nobody goes to prison except maybe me for fraud I didn't commit? He laughed, bitter. You're a school teacher, Emily. You think juries believe sweet little you masterminded all this? We have doctors lined up to say you've been unstable since the separation. One signature and the psych hold disappears. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A video file from Robert. I opened it with Michael still talking. Grainy security footage from a coffee shop yesterday. Michael, David, and Patricia at a corner table. David slid a thick envelope across. Patricia spoke clearly into the hidden mic Robert must have planted. Once she's committed for 72 hours, the power of attorney kicks in. We liquidate everything, blame the breakdown on stress, and she gets out with a prescription and a story nobody questions. Michael nodded on camera. And the teacher job keeps her insurance paying the hospital bills. I looked up from the screen. Michael's face had gone white. He hadn't realized I was watching live. He reached for the phone. I stepped back. Touch me, and that video hits every news station in Chicago before lunch. Sirens sounded somewhere distant, growing closer. He bolted across the grass, coat flapping, disappearing into the crowd near the bean sculpture. I forwarded the file to Andrew Novak, the attorney Robert had put on retainer, then drove to the one place I knew they couldn't follow. The notary's office sat in a quiet brick building off Michigan Avenue. I walked in alone, carrying only a leather portfolio Robert had overnighted. George Whitaker, the elderly notary who had stamped every forged document for the past 2 years, looked up from his desk and went pale when he recognized me. I slid the first set of papers across. Termination of Michael Hayes as CEO of Hayes Thompson Holdings. Effective immediately. My signature, real this time, sat fresh at the bottom. George's hand shook as he raised the seal. Next came the debt acknowledgement. Michael, Patricia, and David jointly and severally liable for every dollar moved without authorization. I watched the old man stamp each page, while Michael's name disappeared from letterhead he had printed 6 months ago. By the time I walked out, the company belonged to me alone, and the 3 of them owed me 8 figures plus interest. That afternoon, Patricia posted the video. A 30-second clip, carefully edited, me screaming in the hallway at school, me shoving Jessica out of my apartment, me shouting on the Grant Park path. The caption read, "When greed destroys family, my own daughter's breakdown." Within hours, it racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Comments called me every name imaginable. Local news picked it up for the evening cycle. The grocery store became a gauntlet. A woman in produce spat on my shoe and called me a monster. In the parking lot, someone keyed "thief" down the side of my car while I loaded bags. I drove home with scratched paint and a carton of eggs smashed across the windshield. I found Sarah on a bench near the Lincoln Park Lagoon, coat pulled tight, mascara streaked. She looked smaller than I remembered. Michael had packed a bag and vanished sometime after the notary visit, taken whatever cash he could grab and left her with the leased Mercedes and a stack of unpaid bills. She stared at the water. "He said you ruined us." Her voice cracked. "Mom says the same thing now." She finally met my eyes. "They're saying I knew about the hit-and-run money, too. My own lawyer advised me to distance myself from all of you or lose everything in the divorce." I sat beside her, not touching. David had already been fired from the commercial brokerage that handled half the North Shore leases. The partners got an anonymous packet that morning showing transfers to Jessica's account and texts proving the affair. His corner office sat empty, nameplate gone before lunch. Sarah wiped her face with a tissue that fell apart. "I have nowhere to go." I stood up. "Then figure it out somewhere else." I walked away without looking back, heels steady on the path while she stayed on the bench, coat darkening under fresh rain. By evening, the hate comments slowed. Counter videos started surfacing. The full, unedited hallway footage. The complete park recording. Bank statements with timestamps. Someone leaked the coffee shop clip of Patricia plotting the psych hold. Public sentiment flipped hard and fast. Patricia's bridge club dropped her. David's country club membership got revoked. Michael's phone went straight to voicemail for everyone except bill collectors. I turned off all notifications and slept for the first time in days. 2 uniformed officers knocked while I was pouring coffee. They read me my rights in my own kitchen, cuffed me in front of the neighbor walking his dog, and put me in the back of a squad car like it was routine. At the district station, Captain Ronald Burke led me to an interview room 3, gray walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. A thick folder waited. Forgery, wire fraud, tax evasion. My forged signatures stared back from every page. Patricia sat on the other side of the one-way glass. I could feel her satisfaction through the wall. The detective slid a confession across the table. Sign, and the charges dropped to probation, Refuse, and the U.S. attorney takes the case federal. The pen felt cold. I picked it up, then set it down again. The door opened. Robert walked in with George Whitaker shuffling behind him, oxygen tank rolling on a little cart. The old man looked terrified, but determined. Captain Burke raised an eyebrow. Robert laid a sworn affidavit on the table. George's trembling voice filled the room as he explained every stamp, every date, every time Patricia or David had brought him documents and paid cash to look the other way. He identified the fake notary log they'd forced him to keep and the real one hidden in his home safe for 2 years out of fear. Robert produced the original log, time-stamped photos, bank records of the cash deposits into George's account the same days the transfers happened. The detective read fast, face hardening. He stepped out. 10 minutes later, Captain Burke returned alone, removed my cuffs himself, and apologized for the inconvenience. Patricia's name replaced mine on the arrest report before I reached the hallway. Outside the station, Andrew Novak waited with fresh filings. Civil suit for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, plus criminal referrals already forwarded to the state's attorney. David got served at the cheap motel he'd checked into. The process server found him arguing with Jessica over who would pay for the room. Michael got his papers through a bartender at whatever club he was hiding in. Patricia received hers in the lobby of the building she no longer owned, security escorting her out while she screamed about lawsuits. By the time we reached the courthouse to file the lis pendens on every property, news vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. Robert simply guided me past them, hands steady on my back. That same afternoon, the judge granted emergency freezes on every account bearing their names. Wages garnished, credit cards canceled, leases terminated. David's brokerage license went under review for ethics violations once the affair and payoffs hit the regulatory board. Jessica's prenatal appointments suddenly showed unpaid balances. Sarah's leased Mercedes got repossessed from the country club parking lot. I watched none of it on television. I signed the last document and walked out into sunlight that felt brand new. The moving trucks arrived at the Gold Coast penthouse before sunrise. Patricia stood on the sidewalk in bedroom slippers and a silk robe. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching a single Louis Vuitton suitcase while workers carried out furniture that now legally belonged to the bankruptcy estate. The doorman she'd lorded over for 20 years wouldn't meet her eyes. A marshal taped the eviction notice to the glass door. She tried to push past him. He blocked her with one arm extended, polite but firm. Chapter 7 leaves no exceptions for tears. Across town, the Saugatuck Lake House got padlocked the same morning. David watched from a rental car he couldn't afford anymore. Engine running because the tank was almost empty. His brokerage license had been suspended pending hearing. Jessica had already moved back to her parents in Indiana once the credit cards stopped working. He drove away when the repo truck hooked his BMW. Michael surfaced long enough to file bankruptcy in Nevada, but the judge converted it to Chapter 7 liquidation anyway. The U.S. trustee seized the offshore accounts he thought were hidden. He shares a studio apartment in Cicero with 2 roommates and works nights stocking shelves at a 24-hour pharmacy. Sarah moved into a studio in Uptown, lease signed in her name only, paid for with her new job selling cosmetics at a department store counter. She still flinches when someone says, family discount. The lawsuit settled into years of court dates, garnishments, credit scores in the low 500s. No more country clubs, no more charity galas, no more private schools for future grandchildren that never came. Just collection calls and payment plans, and the quiet knowledge that every penny they ever flaunted had been built on lies. I sold the commercial properties at fair market value, paid the legitimate creditors, and donated the rest to a legal aid fund for domestic financial abuse survivors and to the rehabilitation fund for Timothy Lawson, the little boy Sarah hit. The penthouse and lake house went to public auction. I never set foot in either place again. My Lincoln Park condo is paid off. My classroom is still mine, and my evenings are quiet in the best way. Robert and I meet for coffee sometimes. We're not rushing anything. Some marriages end in court, some simply end in growth. I kept my name, kept my peace, and kept every boundary lines drawn in permanent ink. So here's the only thing I want you to take from all of this. Family is not a blood contract you owe forever. It's a relationship you choose every single day. The moment someone chooses manipulation, theft, or humiliation over love and respect, you are allowed to choose yourself first. You are allowed to walk away, to protect what's yours, to let the law do its job without guilt. Being nice never protected me. Being quiet never protected me. Standing up did. You do not owe abusers a soft landing just because you share DNA. You owe yourself safety, dignity, and the life you actually worked for. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it completely. And if you're watching this and someone is treating you like you're disposable, hear me clearly. You are not. Take your arm back from whoever's holding it hostage. Stand up straight and let the room go silent when they finally see who's really been carrying the weight all along. I'm Emily Carter, and I'm done apologizing for existing.